So that, I guess, brings me to my next question then. I mean, writing this book for children on these issues was clearly sort of a passion project for you and something you felt very, very sort of dear about. But then, as in our day-to-day roles at global food companies, what should we be doing better? What's the role of the animal feed industry here? And who should we be targeting, and how should we educate the wider world on the importance of sustainable food to sort of help drive some of these changes that we need to see in consumer purchasing habits? The Sciencing Podcast, Season 1, Episode 3. Hi everyone, welcome to the next episode of the Sciencing Podcast, brought to you by Evonik Animal Nutrition. I'm your podcast host, Faazi Adam, Director of Sustainability at Evonik, and I'm really excited to talk to our special guest this month on how to engage consumers and retailers on moving towards more sustainable diets. Specifically, we're going to be talking to Jose Villalon, Corporate Sustainability Director at Nutreco, about a book he's authored recently on how to make sustainable seafood choices. And what's unique about this book is that it's a children's book, and it's the first that I know about that has attempted to engage such a young audience on such an important issue. And to tell you a bit more about Jose, he has decades of experience in the sustainable feed and food world across 3 different continents. In his current role, he is Corporate Sustainability Director at Nutreco, based in the Netherlands, and was originally born in Cuba and raised in the USA. And while there, he studied at the University of Washington, then went on to experience tropical shrimp farming in the Virgin Islands, Ecuador, and Mexico. He then joined the World Wildlife Fund in the US and led its aquaculture program for 6 years. And later on, with WWF and IDH, he co-founded the Aquaculture Stewardship Council, one of the most well-known certification schemes in the aquaculture industry, and was chairman of the board for its first 4 years and continues to remain on the board today. So this year, he published a children's book on seafood sustainability, and that's what we're here to talk about. So I'm really, really excited to welcome Jose to the podcast. So hi, Jose, welcome.
Hi, Faazi. Good to hear you again.
Yes, you too. So thank you so much for joining us today to talk about your new book. I mean, maybe first you could give us an overview of what the book's about.
Yeah, thank you. The book is about seafood sustainability, and it's entitled "When Gabi and Santi Go for Sustainable Seafood," and it's about asking the right questions, because sustainability is a complex word and actual concept, and asking the right questions, even at the child level, with the grown-up next to them, I think would get the conversation started and start raising awareness in restaurants and food retailers.
Right. Okay. And I mean, so I found this fascinating, as I mentioned, because I don't know of any other sort of attempt to talk to children about this issue. What motivated you to write the book?
Yeah, well, it was during the COVID pandemic. I mean, we're still there, but when Amsterdam, where I live, was in lockdown, it became a very kind of lonely and boring place on the weekend. So I wrote this book on my weekend downtime during the lockdowns when there was very little to do. And I started reflecting on what can I do in that spare time? And it dawned on me that I have never actually tried to connect and raise awareness with the younger generation.
Okay, that's super interesting. And I have to say it's a far more productive way to spend lockdown than I did, for sure. I mean, how did you come up with the idea to write for children and their parents on this issue?
Yeah, it wasn't a lot of thought. It was basically we have so much to do, our generation, to try to curb biodiversity loss and climate change. those topics that are really difficult to address or to resolve. So this is not something that's going to be done in 1 or 2 years. And companies like Nutreco have an important role to play in it. So I said, it's fine when we're dealing with adult issues in adult ways, but shouldn't we start to influence that younger generation that's coming? And maybe by the time they're my age or our age, they're going to be more well prepared to make the right choices. And hopefully the problems won't be as seemingly unsurmountable as we see them today.
Yeah, I hope so. Because when I speak to friends and family members who perhaps don't work in our industry, don't know so much about the food industry, the amount of information out there, it's just overwhelming. And I think unless you kind of make a conscious effort to engage with it, it makes it very, very difficult to make the right choices, to even know where to start when it comes to assessing what's a good, more sustainable choice with our food, right? Yeah,
and in those main issues like child labor, forced labor, deforestation, it's collaboration across different stakeholders is always the preferred choice, I think. It's hard for one company alone to make a very a big change. However, by collaborating in various platforms and initiatives to pull in the same direction, I think is pretty much the only way that's going to be resolved. And we're making progress. I think that we've made, when I came to Nutreco 10 years ago, the progress has been quite significant, and I'm proud of that. There's still a ways to go, obviously, but addressing greenhouse gases, getting on board with the science-based target initiative to address greenhouse gas reductions and aligned with the Paris Agreement. Those are important collaboration targets and commitments. And companies, have to get on board. When we joined 2.5 years ago, I think there were 800 companies associated with the Science-Based Target Initiative. Today, there's over 4,000. So this is growing. This is not just a fad. And it's probably one of the most credible and transparent ways to address corporate greenhouse gas emissions.
Definitely. And so that, I guess, brings me to my next question then. Writing this book for children on these issues was clearly sort of a passion project for you and something you felt very, very sort of dear about. But then, as in our day-to-day roles at global food companies, what should we be doing better? What's the role of the animal feed industry here? And who should we be targeting, and how should we educate the wider world on the importance of sustainable food to sort of help drive some of these changes that we need to see in consumer purchasing habits?
Yeah, that's a good point, Faazi. And I think, one way to focus corporate activity around sustainability strategies would be conducting what they're calling the double materiality assessment process, where you seek feedback from external and internal stakeholders from what the impacts are from the corporation to the environment or society. But not only that, that's your typical process. But then now with the double materiality, it also includes how the environment or society affects the corporation, both financially and socially with its employees. So it's a double materiality, and that sets the tone. That actually identifies the material issues, and then the company can prioritize those and focus on the 3 or 5 or 6 issues that is most material for its future. So I think in that regard, Nutreco is undergoing their double materiality right now. However, we have done several materialities in the past, and we've developed a very robust sustainability strategy in Nutreco. We call it Roadmap 2025. It's easily available on our website, public document, and it addresses the issues that are material for Nutreco until the end of 2025. So we still have several years to go to meet those targets.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And I mean, as part of that strategy, you mentioned previously the importance of various stakeholders working together. I mean, have you identified some of your sort of key stakeholders that you want to influence when it comes to sustainability issues and collaboration?
Yes, Nutreco has a history of engaging openly and welcomingly with the NGO community. We see most of the NGOs as a partner in helping address the relevant issues in food supply chain. So I think that is a must. Beyond that, engaging in the various industry association platforms where we can work on the sustainability committees, for example, FEFAC, the European Compound Feed Manufacturers Association, et cetera, are platforms where we can actively help move the needle along with our peers. So that's from an external perspective. Internally, it's all about raising awareness, making sure that the sustainability strategy is not a standalone kind of siloed strategy. It's embedded in the business strategy. So giving the managers the ownership of the different issues, and then having the sustainability department help guide and instruct and raise awareness on the different issues with those managers so they can make their targets.
And what are some of those key issues that Nutreco is prioritizing at the moment?
Well, Roadmap 2025, like I said, the Nutreco sustainability strategy is quite simple and elegant. It has 3 pillars. So pillar 1 is called health and welfare, and that's all about antimicrobial resistance and addressing antimicrobial resistance, where the World Health Organization is now estimating that by the year 2050, more people will die of a simple bacteria infection that happens to be resistant to an antibiotic than are dying of cancer today. And as you know, cancer is the number 1 killer of humans today. So this is a major societal concern, and Nutreco has a role to play here by developing innovative solutions and helping our customers to reduce their dependency or their use of antibiotics when they produce their animal proteins. So be it fish or shrimp or chicken or pork or dairy. So how do we make sure that we address this issue in a credible way that at the end of 2025 will end with very little use of antibiotics, and only when the animal is sick and has a diagnosis to accompany that medication. So it's not that, Nutreco is against all antibiotic use. When an animal gets sick, it does have an animal welfare right to treatment. So, but it needs to be a responsible decision. The second pillar of the 3 pillars that I referenced is called climate and circularity. And Faazi, that is all about greenhouse gas reductions. And it's as part of that component, Nutreco became a Science-Based Target Initiative member back in 2020, in early 2020, and we have set targets for our own operations in Scope 1 and 2 of a 30% reduction of our CO2 emissions by the year 2030. So that's out of scope of 2025, but that's how Science-Based Target structures their target setting. So 30% reduction in our own operations by 2030, and a 39% reduction in our suppliers. So scope 3, our supply chain. And that's where, we work with Evonik as one of our suppliers to collaborate together on working a plan to reduce those greenhouse gases by over the next 8 years to help us reach our target of minus 39%. And all these targets are based on a 2018 baseline. So we measured, we mapped our emissions in 2018 and said we would drop respectively by the year 2030. So the other component of climate and circularity that address greenhouse gas emission reduction is the use of novel ingredients in diet formulation to replace some of the typical commodity ingredients like soy, palm oil, fish meal, fish oil, that are either limited or are actually fueling other impacts like soy does in deforestation. So we're reducing some of that commodity use and replacing it with insect meal, with microalgal oil, with single cell proteins, and other processing byproducts that we can stabilize in as part of our circular economy program. So use of this novel ingredients, and we've set targets. These Roadmap 2025 are very clear targets. For example, in novel ingredients, we commit to use 5 to 10% novel ingredients in our feed by 2025. And for a company like Nutreco, 5%, just the lower range or the lower limit of that range is significant. It's close to 400,000 metric tons of novel ingredient needs in the next 8 years. Next couple of years to the end of 2025.
That's a really innovative part of the strategy from my point of view, because when you look at our industry, sure, that everybody's working on this topic, looking at novel, more sustainable feed ingredients, but there are very few actors that have specifically set a public target here. I guess for all sorts of reasons. I mean, it's a very lots of very new technologies, lots of experimental things going on here, but it's really, really exciting to see global companies like Nutreco sort of taking the lead and setting these types of targets here to help sort of stimulate innovation. So we're going to take a quick commercial break and we'll be right back with you in a few minutes.
On the iconic photo taken by the Apollo 17 crew in 1972, our Earth stands out as a blue marble from the blackness of space. We see the Earth covered in water, but only a tiny fraction is fresh water for us to drink, cook with, wash ourselves in, and water our crops. And the available water isn't distributed equally. 4 billion of us experience severe water shortage for at least a month a year. Over the past 100 years, global water use has increased by a factor of 6, and with the world's increasing population, economic development, and shifting consumption patterns, the trend continues. Overall, some 90% of the annual global water footprint can be traced back to agriculture, and livestock production accounts for almost a third of this agricultural footprint, mainly due to water-intensive feed crops and grazing land. Producing 1 kilogram of beef protein requires between 70,000 and 100,000 liters of water. For 1 kilogram of pork protein, it takes about 50,000 liters. Poultry protein requires around 30,000 liters per kilogram. Plant proteins also differ significantly in the amount of water they require. This can range from below 10,000 liters to more than 30,000 liters per kilogram protein. Thus, the growing appetite for meat and dairy must be met with new and more sustainable production approaches. Our way forward is to feed animals with a balanced low-protein diet, supplemented with specific amino acids. Such a diet is converted more efficiently into protein and reduces water consumption. Thus, animals need less feed, excrete less harmful nitrogen, and stay healthier. This approach saves water in two ways. Since the water footprint of animal-based protein is determined mostly by animal feed, low-protein diets protect valuable freshwater resources. Moreover, the animals need less water to metabolize the excess feed. For the low-protein feed, farmers can rely stronger on local crops. This also protects the environment. This is already possible today. With amino acids and feed solutions from Evonik, we are sciencing the global food challenge.
So welcome back to the second half of our conversation with me, Faazi Adam, Director of Sustainability at Evonik Animal Nutrition, and Jose Villalon, Corporate Sustainability Director at Nutreco. I guess a lot of companies have chosen not to set a target just yet, so it's really interesting to see that what's possible.
Yeah, and I think it was a great vote of confidence from our management board to accept these these targets or these proposals. You could say they're rather bold, but the world is going to be a totally different place in a couple of years. In the space of novel ingredients, there's a lot of opportunities there, and every day there's startups that come knocking on our doors with products and commitments. So I'm very confident about that. Another one of the targets in climate and circularity is 100% recyclable, reusable, or compostable packaging by 2025. And finally, in that same pillar, one of the interesting components when you're in animal nutrition is the life cycle assessment methodology. So can you formulate nutritious diets for animals with ingredients that have a much lower carbon footprint? And that is where I think a lot of new innovative diets are going to start surfacing when formulators start, and we're gearing up for that, to offer life cycle assessment tools to the farmers so that they can not only choose the right feed or make their right choices in making feeds, but also in their grow out, in their farming operations, and in the processing line further downstream. So companies like food retailers like Tesco or Walmart or Carrefour, Albert Heinz of the world will be able to then demand of their suppliers when they buy chicken, for example, to have a limit on the carbon embedded in that chicken meat. And then they can start over time driving those limits down so that they encourage their supply chain to make better choices in diet formulation or in land use change for ingredients, etc. So it's going to be a great future couple of years in the corporate world and sustainability to offer clients these tools. And the third pillar in our roadmap 2025 is entitled or is called good citizenship. And this is all about, inclusivity and gender equality. So we have targets for that. But we also have targets for community development in the communities where we operate in. And our gender equality target is to have 30% women in senior management positions by 2025. And from a perspective of community development, we have targets of 12,000 small marginalized farmers raising their livelihood in a sustainable way. So small marginalized farmers are typically defined by earning less than 1.9 euros a day. So this is extreme poverty. We have a great program in Nigeria, in Africa, where we've engaged with 1,200 small catfish farmers. And over the last 6 years, we've been able to double the size that they harvest their fish at with 30% less feed, also double the number of harvests a year, so much faster growth rate. And they've increased their livelihood, their income, by, I think it's now 100%. So it's amazing the results, how we can train farmers in a creating shared value type of way. So we train them how to farm sustainably. We teach them best practices, but we also sell them feed. So it's not just philanthropical, it's actually creating shared value. They are our clients. And over the years, we've been able to move the needle on it. Now the children, instead of walking to school, are often seen on the back of a motorcycle with a SpongeBob backpack on. Nutreco's mission is feeding the future. And with this program, it's very much aligned. It's about feeding the future, but in the right places where it's needed. So we're very proud of that. And that is the end of the 3 pillars that Roadmap 2025 focuses on.
Yeah, and what I love about this example is that it, as you mentioned, it manages to impact so many important environmental and social issues that are really, really urgent in the food system. I mean, a huge proportion of the food that's produced globally is from smallholder farmers who don't earn very much money per day. But we also have this huge challenge about raising efficiency and sustainability standards in food production. And I think the example you just gave is a really nice way to illustrate that those two things are not mutually exclusive, and that by helping people to make the right choices when it comes to farming, we can also sort of improve their livelihoods as well. So that's something that I'm really pleased to hear about. So there's a lot of pressure on consumers to make the right choices, and of course that's an important part of driving change, but we also have to do everything we can to make sustainable food options the norm rather than a premium product as they so often are right now. And I think a big part of that is really making sure that we're working with the people who are producing food, who are raising animals, and supporting them to be able to use the right technologies, to make the right choices, to improve sustainability impacts on the farm. Is this something that Nutreco is working on as well?
Yes, I think, when Nutreco looks at the consumers, we don't really, we're not B to C. So we're a B2B, business to business company. So we don't really engage much with the consumer, but of course, we're watching consumer trends because that's driving the industry as well. So where Nutreco sees the theory of change, if you will, is with the food retailer, the buyer of that protein in the food retail stores. And I could say, for example, give a story. When I was a kid growing up, food retailers were distinguishing themselves in the USA. They were distinguishing themselves by having high quality food, so wholesome food. If you buy food in this store or if you buy this product, you won't get sick. It's not going to be contaminated. You can't imagine a food retailer trying to distinguish him or herself in the marketplace today with that type of message. It's a given, right? I mean, we all expect the food that we buy at the grocery store to be healthy and wholesome and clean. So that's a given. I think maybe in 10 or 15 more years, sustainability will be the same thing. In other words, the consumer may not have that choice to come in and say, I want to buy something unsustainable. Why? Because the food retailer will have made those choices, the right choices for them. And so that's where I was alluding to earlier with this life cycle assessment methodology type carbon footprinting of the meat on the shelf, because the consumer then would be able to see that what is the carbon embedded in that piece of meat and try to make the right choice, choosing one over the other. So maybe choosing chicken over beef or pork, or the other way around if there's an innovation in that other sector. So I think it's going to be very exciting, and I'm optimistic that those different drivers will start having effect on corporate emissions in the next decade. And we all know this is the urgency of this now. I think the results of COP27 were kind of frustrating in that they didn't really end up with any firm targets or moving away from fossil fuels or coal even. So I think this is where the corporates can really take action on.
Yeah, I mean, I hope so. I think what really needs to happen to sort of protect the future of our food supply is that we go back, we see sustainability as a requirement and an expectation for the food we buy. So you mentioned now, consumers expect that food they get in supermarkets is safe, healthy, nutritious, and we need to make sustainability one of those sort of core basic expectations as well. But I mean, we still have a long way to go to get there. We've covered quite a lot of ground over the past 20 minutes talking about sort of how to engage consumers on this issue, engaging adults, engaging children on making the right choices, the corporate responsibility here to be driving innovation and change in the food production value chain. So I guess I want to finish up on two sort of similar questions for you. What's your final message for parents who want to see a more sustainable future for their children? And what would you say to peers in our industry who want to do more to advance the sustainability agenda?
Yeah, well, on the first one, what would I say to the parents or your listeners that are parents is, we all make choices every day. And I think the end consumer has an incredible amount of power. They should be making the right choices at the dinner table, for the dinner table. When they're shopping, ask the right questions of the manager. Make sure that you're buying food that has maybe been certified to a certain environmental or social standard, that has claims for responsible use or no antibiotics ever used, etc. Make those choices, and then don't stop there. Have a conversation at the dinner table about why they are eating what they're eating that evening. In other words, I bought this because X, Y, and Z, and I did a little bit of reading and found out that this is a major issue or whatever. So I think sometimes we tend to underestimate the power we have by voting with our wallets or voting with our pocketbooks when we go shopping for food. There are better choices on the shelf, and we have the power to exercise those choices. So don't underestimate that power, is my main takeaway for the adults or the parents in the room. What corporates can do, what our peers should be thinking or could be thinking about doing to address some of the issues, I think is the time to act is now. There's a lot of urgency in, you can read in the press with emissions and greenhouse gases and antibiotic use and child labor, forced labor, deforestation, forest fires in South America that are generated for food production. So these are the kind of things that hopefully will come up in their materiality or double materiality assessments if they do one, which I highly suggest they do, and then start looking at pragmatic ways of addressing it. So yes, there's going to be some issues that are so deep and so broad and complex, you're not going to be able to do it. Don't be afraid to join a multi-stakeholder platform that have targets, that have ambition to resolve the issues. Don't be afraid to partner as a corporation with an NGO to help you think about how to address those issues in a relevant way, a measurable way. And the last thing is always try to put a measurable target. If you can't measure it, you can't manage it. So any type of ambition that you want to address in the sustainability or social, environmental sustainability or social sustainability sector, always think of metrics. Always think of putting a target that you can measure and monitor your progress over time. Hold your teams accountable for those trends if they're increasing or decreasing. So I think that would be where I would leave the message at is we're all actors in this. Let's not be passengers. Let's be actively driving the car on it. This is the moment. We have to act and be responsible about that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I guess the common thread between your two answers is definitely whatever role we find ourselves in, whether it's a professional in the food industry or as a parent with children or just buying food for yourself at the supermarket, just not to underestimate the power that your choices have.
Absolutely.
All right. So that brings us to the end of our conversation. So thank you so much, Jose, for coming to spend some time to talk to us sort of about your book and about what Nutreco is doing to sort of further the sustainability agenda in the food industry. It's been a great conversation, so thank you so much.
Thank you, Faazi. It's been great. So, and I look forward to working together with Evonik and Nutreco.
Likewise. Thank you. So this is the end of today's episode. I hope you enjoyed it and took something away from the conversation. Don't forget to tune in to the following episode, which will be released in about a month's time. And if you want to know more about Evonik Animal Nutrition, visit www.animal-nutrition.evonik.com. Science and Podcast, a production of Evonik Animal Nutrition.
Evonik, leading beyond chemistry.